Let's do this then. So, gavel.
Okay.
Yay. All right, so any comments on the minutes or concerns?
I looked through them this morning, and they look fine to me,
Good to me.
which is
Let's do it. That's great.
always a surprise. I usually nitpick, but I decided not. There's no nitpicking needed.
No nitpicking.
Glad I'm seated.
Okay, so we have, so it's a month early, but Catherine's not going to be with us next. And so she asked that we go over if everybody's okay with the meeting times.
Meeting times in the packet here?
Yeah, second, right after the minutes. We just have to approve that this will be okay for us. Sure that, everybody knows their schedule for the whole year.
I don't have an electronic system that is doing my calendar. I would imagine that April 15 and November 18, I would be unavailable for.
Okay.
But that's a 50-50, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we can in fact,
Sorry.
Is, what was it? I know I filled out one of these. That must have been WQI has a meeting on the start of Rosh Hashanah. But
I'm not even sure what.
I don't know where it is either. And it must have been WQI. So it doesn't matter here.
Okay, well, let's, tentatively say this is approved. I mean, if I can suggest we would.
Yep.
It's actually walking in.
Oh, okay. Hey, Ken. You just started. Just started and we were looking at the,
Running a little bit late. No worries. Sometimes.
actually, I'll just take a step back, and we didn't do it like in a formal way, but did you have a chance to look at the minutes previously?
I did, and
You did or didn't?
I did, yes,
And they're fine?
no issues.
Right, so I guess, we should formally say all in favor of approving the minutes.
Aye. That's aye.
So we're approved, and we were discussing the 2024 schedule, which is in your packet. After the minutes.
There we go.
Right. So we were saying, it's hard to know if everybody didn't know, but we have, first of all, we now have the ability to meet on Zoom more often than or more, and get a quorum on Zoom. It should be a little bit easier for everybody. Is there anything in particular that you noticed that might, we're not doing Christmas, we're not. All right, so let's approve, are we in favor of improving, anybody want to make a motion to approve this?
I'll make a motion.
Second. All in favor? Good.
Aye.
All right, so the other thing I should just mention in relation to that is our next meeting, our December meeting for this year will be Zoom only, because Catherine's not going to be available. We've already do it in the county.
And
It's going to be on Zoom.
In December.
and that is the 16th,
18th, December 18th,
18th,
Monday.
Wednesday.
No, it should be a Monday.
Should be a Monday.
Sorry, I'm to 2020.
Yeah, the 16th is a Monday, and that's what we just approved.
So it's the 16th, not the 18th.
The 16th is next year. The 18th is this year.
I made a mistake.
It'll be virtual only, not virtual.
Okay, Zoom only on December, and I'll just put DEC, 16, 2023.
No, December 18th, 2023, online only. Monday, December 18th, 2023. All right.
All right, I think I'm ready to go home.
Our next meeting is on Zoom. And, we can decide how often, how like we're together and all that, but for the next meeting. Okay, so let's just go over Greg, do you want to take us through your,
I'll run through this quick. I think that there's there are some changes that'll be easy to point out, I hope, anyway. We have to, last time we decided to stay with guarded, and I'll talk this through and then we can decide if we want to do that. The ranking chart is, it's basically unchanged. It was 33 and now it's 30. The Hay Beach well, the Gardeners Bay well, that's at third time's a charm. The Goat Hill well is lower than the other three. But it averaged out that it's about a 30 on this chart here, right?
we're at 30% and off.
Yeah, 30th percentile. So, it is what it is, and it's with as little rain as we're getting. The one thing that happens is even when it's dry like this, we're measuring this against the history of the rainfall,
Right.
of the.
Right.
And
30%
the level goes down, the level continues basically to drop down as time goes on over until whatever it is, beginning of winter. That's when it finally starts to pick up. So it may stay at 30 again, even if the numbers look like they're going to go down. The next page, section 3, this is somewhat encouraging. All of the wells except the big 4 wells are above their median values for October. And in truth, the values in pale yellow on page 3 show that's the large wells where their percentile is at right now on section 3. So it's good. I guess whatever rain we did get, has percolated down through the shallower, where the aquifer level is closer to the surface. And that has given us a bump on all the wells. The deeper wells, are lagging, but it takes more time to get down. In terms, any questions on that one, or?
I just have one comment on the headings at the very top, the white part, where the locations are noted.
Right.
And in some cases, you have a street, in other cases, you have a neighborhood. Just glancing at it, it seems to me that it would be more informative if you had neighborhoods across the board rather than just a street. Now, in some cases, those streets don't necessarily correspond to a particular neighborhood. But, you have Shorewood, you have Deering Harbor, you have Little Ram. I don't know what you would call Rocky Point, Belvedere, but certainly Brand or Lily Put is clearly Silver Beach. Most people, wouldn't know what that intersection is. Okay. Manwaring Road, is that adjacent to Silvestre Manor? That well? I'm just saying.
That's a street from, it's a.
If you're looking at this, very quickly, you get a sense of these
It may
these neighborhoods, and particularly in the context of discussing with Gardeners Bay and, the Hay Beach aquifer, how much thicker it is than the other places. I'm just thinking out loud. Comment.
If it's in the minutes, I'll go through and try and select things out. I'll give you a call and see what you think.
Yeah.
Any questions?
The other thing that might be useful just to be including visually in our packets is just the map.
If you send a map, that would.
Just put the map. So we see, so we're, looking at it in relation to the island. Anyway,
That?
I think that's really important.
Yeah, these are historical.
Yeah, I would want
Tags.
to.
Yeah,
Right. I'm just saying, well, you can change them to whatever we want.
yes. I mean, and in truth, I haven't done that. I think only one well in my tenure doing this, only one request. It used to say, I guess, Heights. And they said, it's really Goat Hill. That's where you're measuring. It's right. It's on that.
That's a good-
It's on that It's on, right on the 6th fairway, right off the 6th fairway.
Anyway, clarity is good, so
Yeah,
let's try.
all right, I'll take a look at that.
And then, you know, just looking at things, it's interesting you have the 2016 through 2023 on that section 1. And that's pretty interesting, just the shape of it. The up to 2019 and down, so I think there's a point you're going to wind up racing over.
Oh, yeah, that's,
Part of this meeting is that the last 5 years we've been out
yeah,
of the.
and this chart, which has it's at the end of the report, that really shows very clearly.
Well, that's the 2019, that's the progress from 2019 forward.
That's correct,
Right.
yes.
2016,
That's the last
2019
5.
is up, and then we start to reverse the
Yeah.
last 5 years. So the trend has not been toward, you know.
No, I mean, if you look at our September readings or our August readings, you know, the numbers for this year are lower than the numbers going back the last 4 years.
Right, exactly. So we're definitely not able to count on that, you know, climate change is working in our favor and giving us tons of push through of rain, so.
Surprisingly, yeah.
Ken, did you want to speak?
Well, I guess just quickly, basically, things don't look good. 0.25 inches for November through the 18th. And our year-to-date number is 33.97 on an average we like to keep, 45 inches. Means a lot to catch up. So basically, we need rain.
Maybe it's Wednesday. Maybe Wednesday.
Yes, I predicted
An 89% chance.
an inch and a half. I think I mentioned in my note that to Greg, on my forecast, inch and a half is forecasted between 11:19 and 11:26, but you know.
So everybody,
All right, so I think, you know, you got the other information there. And so, you know, given what we just talked about here, talking about the lack of rainfall and the results of virtually no change on the big 4 wells.
Right.
Again, that we should say guarded, yes?
we should, until we've reviewed, you know, we've discussed the possibility of changing the criteria, but until we change the criteria, it should be automatic. Shouldn't be a subjective thing.
Okay.
Or what we wish it to be or whatever.
That's all I got.
Okay, so we have guests, Lou and Lois, who are going to talk to us about their experience with saltwater intrusion at Silver Beach.
My name is Lou Corbett, and I'm here with my wife Lois. We have been full-time residents of the Silver Beach since the mid-1980s. And I sum it out, I was a summer resident at Silver Beach since 1953 in my parents' house. So we know the importance of being responsible for the use of the aquifer. We have always had good water up until a few years ago when we noticed the quality of our water was degrading. Our water now has bad odor and taste, so we drink on and cook only with bottled water. And should a major storm or hurricane hit Shelter Island, and even a significant rise in the sea level due to global warming, we could lose our well totally to saltwater intrusion. Also, there is no other location on our property for us to be able to sink another well. So what we would like to know, is there any steps being taken to bring Suffolk County water to Silver Beach section of Shelter Island in the near future? And if similar to what was done in West Neck. And after speaking to some of our neighbors, they feel the same about going to the Suffolk County Water Authority to Silver Beach as we do. Thank you for listening to us. If you have any questions, answer them to the best of our ability.
You know, I think we were talking about a little, and one of the things that came up was that you're looking for a substantial investment possibly in having to do something with your well, if it's even possible.
Right. Exactly. I didn't hear what you said.
You know, like, anyhow, that's what we,
Oh, you mean, yeah, I didn't hear what you
like a
said.
new well. I mean,
Yeah.
But you're saying that you feel that you believe that there isn't a location for a new well one.
Right.
I don't think there is. That's the.
Yeah, that's
They
the
have. They have a septic that's up high there and too close to the septic.
And the water, I have to say, really deteriorated. We turn on the faucet and it smells like the creek, honestly.
Right.
You know,
At low tide.
at low tide, I might add.
Maybe you could also talk about your conservation efforts in terms of consumption.
Yeah, we really are very, very diligent. I'll give you an example. We take a shower, when we're soaking up, we shut the shower off. We don't flush the toilet every single time we use it. I do only one wash a day, spread it out because I don't want to strain, the well and everything. And you think
We don't have a swimming pool, we don't do any irrigation.
We don't
have any of
water
that stuff.
lawns or anything like that. We actually capture rainwater to water my few plants on the deck.
How do you do water? You capture rainwater?
Yeah, the rainwater in a barrel, and I use it, to water my plants on my deck. And
What do your neighbors have to say, Lois? I mean, down that alley, that.
yes, the neighbors, some of them said, well, my water is good now, but honestly, I don't know how long it's going to last, so they would be in favor of it. They said definitely, we would be in favor of it, if not right now, but in the future. And even when they were thinking, selling their homes in the future, to say, if your well is totally gone, you can hook up to, Suffolk County. So they were very, in favor of it.
And some of their wells, they actually had to move them
And
because
some,
of saltwater
and
intrusion.
I'm not gonna mention names, but some of our neighbors are also in the same position, that if that particular well they have now goes, that's it. They don't have another place to put their well.
Yeah, it's right next to North Crab Creek, makes things up on the edge of that estuary.
It's a bit of a peninsula too. so
And
yeah, intrusion.
now that there's no outlet there, maybe it takes longer, because the outlet moved to South Crab Creek. It might take longer then for the water to recede, so it's continually higher, maybe, I don't know, than the North Crab Creek.
That water does move very quickly out of the new outlet, Ken.
I'm just.
Sean and I inspected it at, when at high tide as it was going out. It goes out fast.
Have you had the testing, what salt level were you seeing, and were there any other contaminants you saw in any testing?
I've had the water tested, not in recent years,
That's-
but we can tell, I can tell by the taste and by the odor.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it
It's
would-
not-
it might be, since this is a new event that started to happen, it sounds like you've got a report that says before these problems started to show up, you've got water that said it was good.
Right.
Now you've got the water you got now, and getting those numbers would be helpful, I think, for you, just to know.
Yeah.
What should we do here?
Right.
Because my feeling would be that you have there's a time frame here to get Suffolk County water into that area is gonna take time. It's not like.
Well, that's right.
Phone and say, hey, water man, come and bring me,
Yeah.
So, getting drinkable water to you, and especially not knowing I don't think salt water particularly gives you, levels that are not healthy are often not detectable by taste.
But let's take this a step further. What we need in Silver Beach, just like on the Monantic Peninsula, is a test program similar to what's being done in the center. It's just that simple. That way we can get the data points so that we can then inform people to approach the percentage necessary to invite Suffolk Water Authority in.
Right. Doug, you know that in the general sense of the committee is, yes, we absolutely need to be doing investigative testing like we've done in the center for near shore, whether it's just like how we did it for the center or whether there's other approaches, with the other approaches possibly being professionalized by working with the USGS. That's an item way down on our agenda. We may not get to it, but we are very much, I think that there's.
And you would work with the
general sense of agreement
USGS because why?
Because the issues of saltwater intrusion are a little different than the issues of, checking for saltwater intrusion is a little bit different than checking for nitrates in your water supply. Because the USGS has tools for doing a more broader scale mapping of where the saltwater interface is. And if we were recording how it was moving, we would have much better prediction of, who's going to lose water. They can use magnetic imaging of the saltwater interface over broader areas. So there may be, and in addition, has proposed to us boring, significant test wells as well, a lot around the perimeter.
So you're talking about them
So-
doing geophysical testing
Yes.
and magnetic imaging, resonance
correct.
imaging.
Essentially,
Have you
yes.
talked about that with them?
We did a study with them before your time on, and again, they can get much more precision now than they were able to get back then.
Yes.
So, right, so I think that this is something again, I suspect that as usual, the ends of our agenda are going to be ragged because we have a lot to cover all the time. But we're all on board in terms of, yes, we need to equally focus on the saltwater boundaries and the perimeter problems of saltwater intrusion as we are on nitrogen in the center. That's really important. The hard part, and just in terms of being realistic, and Greg was, I think, alluding to this, certainly we were instrumental in working with Suffolk County, encouraging the collaboration with Suffolk County Water Authority for West Neck. We are continuing to look at how we can expand public water supply. Your location, as Greg was saying, will take a long time to get to from where there's lots of water to where you are now. So interim solutions start to become important for you guys. Jay?
So it's not uncommon for wells to be set a little too deep, and then you're pulling from very close to that saltwater interface. So it might be worth reaching out to a well company to see, have them come evaluate it and see if they can raise the well up a bit. You can get up into fresh water.
Yeah, it's pretty shallow to begin with,
Yeah,
quite
so it
honestly.
could be set a little too.
Yeah, Lou dug it.
Your county requires you to go 40 feet deep, but in your area, you might only need to go 12.
Well, saltwater testing is an awful lot simpler, or for sodium chloride is a relatively straightforward test. It doesn't require, to where you're going, Peter, I can understand for the
No,
water.
I'm not saying that the simple testing approach isn't a good idea too.
That could be like to me, that would be the fastest way of resolving the issue. Would be just a sodium chloride test. I don't know how many people feel about using, these meters that measure, just the solids, at 500 milliliters per gram instead of 250, where it measures it just for salt as such, using an electronic device. Okay.
So, but before leaving your comment about, could Suffolk County Water Authority help here? So I encourage you to continue that discussion internally within your community, within the Silver Beach community. I will point out again and again and again that public water supplies will be to an extent demand driven. There is a question of feasibility, what can be done where. There may be a location where a well, independent from what's going on in the center, could be installed and become a source of public water in your area. Suffolk County Water Authority certainly, it may or may not be feasible to go in this direction, but they certainly won't do it unless your community is demanding it. Unless your community is agreeing that, oh yeah, we all want to hook up to this, we all want this.
So
What about just pricing it out, Peter? We asked Suffolk County Water Authority to give an estimate as to what it would cost. I don't know how to, Doug, for the Silver Beach community.
Yeah, I
They
have,
run a pipe, from West Neck area down there.
the question is, where is the water coming from? Where would you locate a well to service that?
Ask them that question.
Well,
So,
I'm just saying in terms of,
yeah, go ahead.
If I could just say that it's important to remember that it doesn't have to be a whole community. It can be 40% of an area. 40%
Exactly.
of the population, if
That's
that
right.
that percentage, however they calculate it, then SQUA will come in and assess.
Right, so if you were able to get 40% of your community saying, yes, I would agree to sign up right
What
away.
about being interested?
Okay, yes, just, is it, you need 40% to say, I am definitely going to hook up? Or 40% to say, yes, I think it's a good idea to, start the process of bringing pipes in?
Well, to be precise about that 40% number, or Lisa, you may want to do this, but I'll start, and if you want to do it better than me, take over. To be precise about it, where it is feasible for them to extend their water services, if 40% of the people on a block agree to hook up, it's going to cost several $1,000s for the homeowner to hook up to that public water, they will put the main in.
Okay,
So now you don't quite have, there's not the rest of the infrastructure in place yet. It's going to take time, but it will be noticeable to Suffolk County Water Authority if a whole community is saying, oh, we've kind of thought this through, and
now.
half of us think, more than half of us, or
clarify
80%.
something, when you say the community,
Mm-hmm.
that means all of Silver Beach or just our neck of the woods?
It would actually be along any line that they were running. They will run that line, assuming that 40% of the residences along that line.
Jump in for a second. The 40% number stems from a minimum amount of people committing to the infrastructure project. But it's good practice that there's just overwhelming demand in the area. The other issue is that, it's not even an issue, but the other condition is that if it's a demand because of contamination or inaccessibility of water, that standard gets reduced to, I think, 25% interest. So those are numbers that are important to keep in the back of your minds as you advance this conversation. But the general concept, so you're seeking consensus from your whole community, as broad as you can be. Certainly, you have the uniqueness of both geographic location, your neighborhood is well defined, but you also have the benefit of an organized homeowners association. Those are tools that you should be using now to get consensus and information aligned and not be so worried necessarily about the 40%, 25%.
What about the geographic area, Joe? How small could it be?
It can be as small as the route to get to where you're seeking. If you have the end of a street that you need to get to, that's a boundary. It could be as broad as however big of a service area, you're looking, in terms of calculating the numbers of, how many households you're passing.
It's a small neighborhood where they live, very small and really separated from other neighborhoods. But when you say to connect in, are you talking about from where the water is taken out of the ground?
Correct. Not necessarily from where it's sourced, but certainly the route is part of that consideration. I'll give you an example. If the water comes from miles away, unrelated neighborhoods, there's an expense to develop that infrastructure that may be completely unattractive if the service area is only 2 or 3 houses. All that expense is borne by those few people. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody along that route of infrastructure is in the service area. There's a lot of nuances in terms of how you lay this out. Does that make sense? Just because the water came from West Neck, for instance, and went all the way down to Silver Beach, not everybody necessarily has to be considered in that service area. You could be quite literally sourcing the water from an existing well and delivering it to a different service area. And now you're looking at 40% of perhaps of
The extension.
Right.
of the extension. Yeah.
A question, Joe. We solved the problem of 1 or 2 folks having a water issue in Montour Colony by allowing a well on municipal property on the street. There are places up in that neighborhood where you are probably, because the issue they have is that the issue is like, where to put my well, in essence.
Sure.
We could solve that issue with that strategy
Potentially.
and be able to, it might have to go on the other side of the road, which is a little more expensive to go under the road there with a pipe. But And maybe it's just for one family, or maybe there are two on your, down the street, maybe Reaches need one down there too. But I'm saying that eliminates the issue we have of the time delay and everything else related to West Neck and the size of the problem. This reduces it to.
There is a provision in town code that allows a private well to be installed on town property in the event that you're unable to source the water within your private property. And it doesn't happen very often, but we do have an established permit procedure for that. Usually it's utilizing the road shoulder, or actually exclusively it's utilizing the road shoulder someplace.
Is that right? At 5-foot boundary of town property?
Depends on the road. Some roads are paved.
For instance, they're up the hill almost.
In any case, it'd probably be helpful if you send me an email or give me my card before you leave. We can set up a time to talk about what other options you might have that involve town property or something like that.
Excuse me?
Go ahead, Andrew.
We're talking a lot about solutions without really knowing the extent or a good tight definition of the problem. We have two residents who come in who've got what's known in the trade as a taste and odor problem. I'm not aware, we suspect it's saltwater intrusion. We suspect it's chlorides. We don't really know. We also don't know. We're hearing anecdotally that neighbors have similar concerns, but we don't know the extent of those. So I like the idea of trying to get a handle on the problem, and that will make the discussion of solutions much more pointed. So can we discuss a testing program suitable for what we're hearing, which may or may not be like what we've done in the center, as a first step?
I think we definitely need to be discussing that. It's not, we will be reviewing the center testing results in the course of this agenda. I don't know, I think that in that context, we can at least be thinking about, are we thinking of a similar program? Are we thinking of something a little different? But I think that we need to devote a larger chunk of our time to precisely your question.
Point there, by the way. And we do have a sodium chloride test kit. I don't know if we have any skills left that could do that. We're doing it, for the irrigation law issue. Bring a jug of water to someplace over here and have somebody over there maybe can titrate it and then see if there is what the salt number is.
But I think what Andrew is really talking about, wider testing, ties into what Joe was talking about, because if you're able to dimension the problem on scale, then the economics to the solution, if it turns out that this problem is on scale, then the economics in the solution make more sense, because then you have more consumers for limited
More
infrastructure.
consumers aware that they need that.
I would even boil it down even simpler and say, this is really demand driven. The solution, I don't even have to call it a solution, but the idea of a community system for that area doesn't have to be because you ran out of water because you had a saltwater problem currently. It's because you're worried about resiliency or sustainability. That's itself a reason to pursue some of these other options. So they don't have to be they can be mutually exclusive. Certainly the data is helpful, perhaps your best tool in getting consensus, showing people that they have more, apparent problems. But, a good example of the challenges with testing is that as you approach higher chloride levels, you tend to run into other problems like odor, other minerals start to come up in high abundance as you're approaching that saltwater interface. So you may not be into full salt water yet, but you may be seeing other signs and symptoms of a fragile.
For example, equipment like water heaters and things that are exposed, that are vulnerable to high levels of chlorides in the water, higher than they were designed to handle.
Pipes, all of them, yeah.
Yeah, it's just not uncommon to see spikes in other compounds and minerals as your chloride level hasn't yet maybe reflected it, but that's just indicative of where you're drawing from now, sort of at the bottom of that freshwater interface, and you're starting to pull up other things that maybe you didn't see before. The other thing about salts is that they tend to slowly creep up and then they fly up really fast. So the first increase that you'll see maybe isn't indicative of how quickly the problem can be accelerating. After you cross a low threshold of chlorides, it tends to go up very, very fast. After that, it's not necessarily as gradual like, say, nitrogen is, where you're seeing an accumulation over time.
Right. My concern has always been another Sandy that's even maybe more intense than Sandy. And we have in Silver Beach along Peconic Avenue, 30, 40 families all of a sudden get salted, just like that.
From Sandy.
And then hide the name, all of a sudden they come into the town and say, okay, guys, what are you doing? What have you done? Here we are, we don't have water. Do we have a big tanker that we're gonna take people around with and help them out for a while? Anyhow, that was a lot of my discussion at one time about planning ahead, which had to do with working with whoever in order, Suffolk County, whoever, to give these folks an idea as to what it would theoretically, and I don't know what it would be, it could be, because the number could change dramatically because of the sourcing issue.
Can I just ask a question here?
Lisa, sure.
So are we suggesting the first, is one of the principal or the first things to do, are we requesting that the homeowners do a testing? Or are we suggesting that the town, on behalf of the homeowners, do the testing, and not just chlorides, but a full panel testing in order to find out what other contaminants or compounds might be obvious in their water supply? I'm not clear. And I think that probably Lou and Lois want to know that. Whose responsibility is this? Should we be the first ones to do the testing, or is the town going to do this on our behalf? So I think.
Well, we includes you, Lisa. What do you have a feeling about what we are suggesting? Do you feel that, I mean, it seems like Doug is suggesting, and I
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the town should do it.
I've been in.
Absolutely.
And not only us, offer it to, our neighbors and other.
Entire
people,
community.
Entire community.
Communities that are.
I would say the peninsular communities should have this.
Jay has raised his hand a couple of
Yeah.
times. I wanted to recognize.
It seems to me that the first thing should be a well evaluation to make sure the well's not too deep. You're gonna keep testing salt and salt and salt when the well could be just set too deep.
Check the point,
Readjust
all
it.
like that. So.
Right, so.
That won't check that. So I would probably start with well evaluation to put a contractor in and take tests while they're there, find out where it is, because I've seen this 3-4 times.
Right, you can solve things by raising your wellhead.
Raising the well up.
Right.
Where we are on
And
Silver
then
Beach,
go forward.
the freshwater lens, we're near the water, it's very thin.
Absolutely.
You can only pull the well up so much, you'll have drawdown, you'll be.
Absolutely. Still, Jay is saying that this is something that would be important to investigate for you, yeah.
How deep do you think your point is?
How deep? I would say it's about 6 feet into the aquifer.
From the surface, how far down do you think it is?
I know from our original survey, the freshwater table is about 12 feet from grade.
Right.
So you have a very narrow range
It's
in which to work.
very
small.
thin.
And
Yeah.
When we first put the well in, we were an old time Shelter Island well driller
Right.
advised us, how to do it. And he said, and that's the way he said to do it. And like I said, for all the years, we've had no problems except for the last few years now. And going back to getting the survey, if enough people want this, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a main put in? So like you were saying before, it's gonna take years now to get the thing, but if there was a main there, you could have them hook right into it and that would be it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with, and, there are other people are, that the main winds up getting, that's a 30-year payback, right? Payoff of people that are using the main.
Yeah.
So
You need
If there's
well, you
nobody-
need a well first.
Yeah.
You need a
You need-
location for a well.
You need the source.
Drawing the water, right.
Right. So we get that we have a real infrastructure problem here. But among the things I would like you to take away is that, I mean, you've approached us saying we'd like to consider Suffolk County Water Authority as possible partner in getting that infrastructure. I think that there has been a resistance to Suffolk County Water Authority as if it were the county coming in and taking over our water systems. I think that it's important for, as you're discussing it within your community, to understand that Suffolk County Water Authority is a nonprofit in the public service. It has a relationship to Suffolk County, but it is not the county coming in and taking over Shelter Island's water. It is the professionalized service out in the Suffolk County area. So, you know, collaborative with them. Keep it simple solutions, as Jay is suggesting. We definitely know that we have to be doing more of that science and investigation and testing. So we're with you, but, and you know, there may be these smaller solutions like Joe is suggesting, and Joe's inviting you to have a conversation with him. So anyway, that, I hopefully this, you know, we're giving you our best.
Yes,
And
thank you.
it's gonna take time,
You know,
but
considering
yeah.
everything, and, you know, the idea of getting testing through the town, I think would be good, just so we know to identify the problem, and then like Lisa said, and then finding the source where, you know, we're gonna get this water is a big step as well before we even think about putting names in and all that.
it's really a shame that all of us, you know, we're all citizens and not, you know, professionals. So some of us have some professional exposure to the water supply business. But, you know, we as just the individuals of Shelter Island really have to be thinking creatively about how do we build up infrastructure, how do we finance infrastructure, all this stuff that's a little beyond us, but maybe collectively, you know, we can be smart and come up with smart things that evolve toward more comprehensive solutions. Smaller solution maybe for a few homes that can then be hooked in some fashion to larger solutions. So.
Well, I agree with Andrew's statement about we got to find out what's in that water. And then one way to do that, the cheapest way is to send it to the county. They'll come out, grab it, cost you $100. You may not hear from them for a year. I mean, that's the downside. The plus side with the other would be to spend a little bit more money and go to a local guy like Holman and have him do some basic analysis on what you got, which would be a great starting point, at least from some of the things you're talking about, Joe, about what other kind of things do we have an issue with before we just go down the salt piece. The salt piece is pretty straightforward, quite honestly, with a sodium chloride test.
Okay, but.
But anybody that has water, good water now that they're satisfied with, like Ken was saying, could lose it at any significant storm.
Right, yeah, that's a longer term.
So, yes,
It's
and
not
we're very aware of resiliency and
And the
climate change issues as being a
sustainability
threat
of water.
at this point. So stay tuned, because, you know, we just went through around this year with the high nitrogen triangle. We're kind of coming to conclusions with that. We'll be working on that later in this meeting, and we'll be, as we move forward in these next months, looking at just exactly what you're asking for, certainly the testing piece, kind of more immediately.
Right,
Okay.
yes, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you for coming in and speaking to us today.
Our pleasure. All right, thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So this is the worst possible setup for Jay, but on the other hand, maybe a good one for having a conversation about. We've had a couple of visits to Gardeners Bay Country Club. I know that Greg, for the first one, wrote up a kind of a review from his perspective of that, of our visit. I know that Joe and Meg and Andrew visited on a second visit. I attended the first, so I'm curious about the second, but Greg did do some work. Greg, did you want to do a really brief summary of what you saw? And Jay, why don't you come up to, you know, and I'd like to make this, you know, a conversation. We're looking for solutions that wind up working and wind up advancing things rather than freezing us in place. Also, on our first visit Dave, is Dave on? Dave Ruby had joined us as well, and I know Dave has also had ideas, so.
Well, it's just that the meeting objectives, when the group went out, it was really a fact-finding effort. We weren't looking to make any decisions or.
Absolutely not.
There was no negotiations going on. The first fact-finding item was a consideration of pulling water out of the aquifer on Hay Beach and storing it in either a pond or it would be 6 million gallon.
Some sizing of a storage pond so that pumping could happen in the winter, not in the summer. And there's questions of science around that.
Right. The review the efforts that Gardner's Bay Country Club, they were working on ways on their facility, on their 160 or 150 acres, of how they could improve and increase the recharge of rainwater into their aquifer under their facility. We looked at some things regarding that, the cistern berms and things like that. And then the question, can any increase in pumping be fully paid for by conservation capture and groundwater recharge? And that is a topic I think that I'd rather have you talk about if we're going to talk about that. We talked about the general, the time shift of water extraction from summertime when it's actually being used to wintertime, and what impact that might have on the ability of the fresh water to push and hold the salt water at bay. And we talked that through a little bit. We talked about storage of the pond. We looked at an area where you could cut a whole bunch of trees, turn that into a pond. Jay explained the technical issues of why in their original application to the DEC, they said, it's a sandy soil, you'd have to have a liner in it, you'd have to have shallow perimeter, and you can't drain it fully, you can only drain some portion of it. So that kind of came up as an issue. The cistern, right now, Gardner's Bay Country Club, I don't think the cistern is in the application with DEC at this point.
It wouldn't be, it would just go to the town.
I'm sorry?
It would just go to the town, it wouldn't be, it's not a part of the DEC application.
Okay, all right. So the thought is they would put a cistern, which would handle 1 to 3 days worth of water, and that the pumping that they do now on the high points of the golf course, they would take the one well that they use now, they would put 2 additional wells in, so they would have 3 wells to draw water from, so that it would reduce the potential for upconing
And redundancy.
It basically would provide, the 3 wells would kind of provide infrastructure should a larger amount of water be approved by the DEC. That's, from.
But the problem is we are on one well, and when one well dies, we would be happy to get a second well.
Sure.
And the consultants suggested that we really get a third well, because then you can spread it across a larger area and.
I understand the philosophy behind that.
I'd rather pay for just one well.
Yeah. Okay. The impact of water extraction, summer impact, winter impact, I'm not sure that I know where to go on that right now.
I don't think that we want to spend a lot of time on
Okay.
that, but you did,
All right, I'll go
you
through
did
the
throw it
top.
to me for a moment.
Okay,
Let
yeah,
me just
that-
take that up for a second.
That's a long topic.
No,
The
no,
rainfall
I
berms, we
like-
looked at those. The only thing, that theoretically and at a first blush, it certainly looks like it's a good thing to be trying to put the water back into the ground. Probably a clearer understanding of the quality of that water. I guess my thought would be is that if you push a large amount of water, you should certainly know that large amount of water is good water. But that's something that would just that's an evaluation, a future evaluation. The town code is the limit of number of acres. The volume of water that can be extracted is really established by the DEC permit. And the town would presumably have the right to object should the DEC. As a matter of fact, I believe that, Joe, you indicated at an earlier meeting that you have communicated to the DEC that there is a town code restriction on the increase of the gallonage and the acreage to be done.
Not on the gallonage, so our town code does not
Right.
prohibit or indicate any restriction on use. It just makes exceptions for irrigated surfaces prior to 2003, and it also provides an exception for greens and tee boxes.
But that
Sort of
existed.
in perpetuity, as long as it's greens and tee boxes. So that's actually a good point that I think you're mentioning some,
Right, I would like to bring, that was the
Yeah.
sort of perspective out of a first meeting. And
Yeah.
it's a second visit, and so you and Andrew.
So there was a couple of other things, but I think that was those are the high points.
Good, I mean, again, we're just trying to.
The maintenance effort, Jay explained that a good portion of the 6 million gallon increase that's been requested is for maintenance and you know, in order to water in fertilizer, pesticides, and to remove a waxy coating. And that is a topic that, you know, I guess none of us are at this point have gone in depth to find out how appropriate is that, you know, that need. Personally, you know, I think that we talked about the water for the clubhouse, it's 100,000 gallon, that they would use that source really well. WC hasn't talked about that, you know, we probably should have some dialogue on that and say, hey, you know, I get, if it certainly is something in order to run the facility that the way they're running it, it sounds like they are restrained with water and drinking water and that. And that was the high points, that I go through that.
So the well, it's not an additional new well, it's a replacement well. So one well's going away and it's just gonna get moved to a different location.
Okay. Didn't chain it down, it wandered away.
We found that.
That was a detective's joke, Jay.
I think
You
that,
know, the old well is,
right now, it's in a location where it needs to get moved to a different location.
okay.
Joe, would you want to just take up a little bit about the second visit and
Yeah.
what ideas were discussed?
Yeah, the second visit was for group 2, I guess, who couldn't attend the first. And largely the same general points were covered. We walked the site, we saw the terrain, some of the other territories being considered for part of this project. But largely it was an open discussion about concepts, needs, trying to understand what the club is ultimately trying to achieve and understand what perhaps the impacts to the neighborhood would be. And I think we left there in a good place, I think, revisiting what our roles could be in this as a WAC, revisiting what the club is faced with in terms of constraints from the town itself, separating perhaps what is the responsibility of, say, the DEC, the town, the WAC, the club. One thing we spent a bit of time talking about, which I think is important to reflect on here, is sort of the confluence of responsibilities, and there's been a bit of mismatching in terminology and overlap in responsibilities. But, you know, we clarified that the town code does, you know, the 612, you know, we're not like the water accountants as the WAC or the town. Our code does not bind us to make a decision on whether, you know, 6 is okay, 8's okay, but 10 is not okay. That's not our responsibility. We re-examine the code to understand that our decision-making ability and what we're currently limiting as a town is irrigation surfaces, so that's really what this question is coming down to is the club asking for an expansion of surfaces to irrigate, not necessarily the number of gallons. And I think we often get lost in discussion about, well, they have 6 now, they're asking for 12, should we negotiate to another number? That's not our responsibility. That is the whole purpose of the state's involvement. The DEC evaluates these applications. They are the technical experts. Their purpose is to evaluate this request, to understand if it's safe based on the geology, based on the technical analysis. So I think it's important to say that back out loud here, because that is not our burden. We are not supposed to be the technical reviewers of their application. That is the state's role, to provide that layer of safety in terms of what is permitted and what's not. Our role is to, I think, one step higher, look at the impacts of the community and to see if we're able to support this application in a way that provides benefits to all parties, certainly not at the expense of any others.
Right. That was a good net out, which brings me to a question I had regarding the town code and what we can control and not control. One of the issues I always had here was when we call a water emergency, the issue we would have would be, oh, by the way, they're doing all that up there, so why should I worry about my water here, where we have plenty of it possibly. And so the thought that I had was that conflict there of we don't have any control, I don't think, in our town code of them abiding by the water advisory committee.
There is.
There is.
There is in that. It says that the town can.
Okay,
Can
my question.
Yeah, in that section of the town code, I believe it said the town maintains the responsibility to
Control?
To control, to not.
Like a
mandatory restrictions of water use.
Yes, if they're, the town has the authority to say, hey, we said that you could water that area, but now we've changed our mind, but because there's no water on our island. So there is
like
that.
a state of emergency type.
Yes, a state of emergency. And I think the state of emergency, I tend to myself roll down into the emergency. There's a 90% of the life.
Right.
There's 10%, and the 10% is the emergency. It's what's happening in the 90 in the big time.
Yeah, right.
Which is just ordinarily today and yesterday. So
Well, it's like saying, how far do you want to go, in other words, before, if it wouldn't be the town, maybe it wouldn't even be the water advisory committee calling for that kind of a level of, I don't know.
if I recall the verbiage, it's the town board retains the authority to say, no, the sections that allow them to.
Restrictions on water
Would be eliminated.
We just have the issue of our own,
in an emergency.
our own series of levels.
Well, we're advisory, and then the board presumably takes up some of what we say and
even
works
then,
on that.
Basically, they would probably not say they would probably say, yeah, we'd like to see that for the rest of the town, but not Gardner's Bay Country Club.
Well, again,
Well, there are other exemptions as well that I think that's relevant, like agricultural exemptions. A good example, I think, is Sylvester Manor does similar applications for their own irrigation purposes. They never come before this committee or the board. In fact, oftentimes, nobody even knows about it if they're adding a new well, or they do this pretty regularly. They expand capacity, they move a well from one place to the other. They're making moves, based off of agricultural operations. Long story short, that's an exemption in the irrigation code, so the town has no oversight over
Makes sense.
over those activities. And that's part of what the golf club operates on now, is there is an exemption for golf courses, one of which the town owns, and those exemptions are already carved out. So the activities that happen within them are already outside of what the existing code is.
so therefore, we're looking for ways that we can work with the golf course so that their incentives and our incentives become a little bit aligned toward doing the best things. So Jay, would you want to speak at all to your needs for expansion? And I know that one of the things that people keep throwing around is that the golf course is planning to double in size.
To double.
Yeah, I think I got something just here about.
We're gonna be 18 holes.
Right.
Within 36 holes.
Right.
But we will be adding tee boxes, additional tee boxes to help sustain some of the older members.
Well,
Some of those
you
players,
should talk to us about the purpose of what you're doing in terms of any expansion, because clearly if we're going to
That's
be
part of the
trying to
golf.
achieve something, it should be
Right. That's
for.
part of the golf experience of the club for various levels of play.
So you're thinking about expanding areas that are less distant or less walking up and down hills and.
Even though the tee boxes will be located in various locations to make the holes shorter for less experienced or older players.
Okay,
The golf range area would be enlarged because practice is a huge part of the game. We get a tremendous amount of practice at the golf course. So in order to move play around to preserve turf and grow turf until you get back on it again, we want to be able to rotate the play around.
okay,
So that area would be expanded, and then we're looking to reconfigure the golf course down the road, where 2 holes would get added and 2 holes would be removed.
okay,
So that's really just a net change.
okay. So you're not really proposing a doubling of acreage or anything like that?
Well, when you talk about the maintenance that we want to do to the golf course, those are the areas that when we want to put out like a wetting agent to be able to get the dew and everything, and like rains and moisture back down into the ground.
Right,
Those applications have to get watered in. So those are, when we put down grass seed. So let's say we go through a really bad summer and we bake out. We would like to be able to put some grass seed down and get it watered and established and grown
right.
back in for the
With
golf course.
erosion and,
Right, and we're talking about doing construction on the golf course to be able to berm and contain the water on the course.
right,
We need to be able to irrigate and water that grow in so that we can play on the golf course.
and I know in conversation with you, you guys would like some credit for if you're preventing runoff and capturing into the aquifer. It's not all about taking from the aquifer, a lot of it's about putting back in.
You saw a lot of piles of soil
Yeah, we did.
when you were at the club. So, that's a good size undertaking of a project.
Okay, so now was there an idea in terms of?
It is a doubling of acreage.
Is it?
About the green areas.
It's doubling of the acreage.
Yeah, the area probably is doubled.
Irrigated area.
Irrigated area is probably
The
doubled.
whole box.
For maintenance purposes. Okay, so,
But the maintenance is on and off based on when you do. It's just not irrigated. It's on when you need just to do the maintenance. Or when we do the Bay Bunker construction project, we're gonna build turf, put down new turf sod, and then that turf needs to be grown and established. And then as that turf takes hold, that's weaned off the water.
right, so you're saying it's not regular, it's not,
Right.
it's just during the maintenance period, you're looking to have some additional areas that.
And we're asking for 12 million.
Uh-huh.
At the end of the day, by the time we get all the construction done and Chris builds in regular maintenance and how we're going, we'll have a better understanding of exactly what our gallonage is. And we're gonna be reporting to the DEC every 5 years. And based on that, and on that number, it could be significantly less.
Right.
But we need to start somewhere we know that number will cover us to get our major expansion, or not expansion, but our construction done to the golf course.
Right.
And then from there, if we need to make some adjustments as we go, because we know we'll pick up some efficiencies on the new system that went in. But we're still, estimating and guessing at what the numbers ultimately are gonna be.
Right, there was some guessing about the efficiency number. Well, yeah, okay, and then, from listening to Joe and others, there was some sense that you could have additional cisterns for doing water capture for water that sits on the surface.
Right, so these are things that we've been discussing in the visits, which I think the visits were great, so you can actually see the property. A lot of people haven't even been there before, to have an understanding of really what we're looking at. So I didn't get the chart until just recently. I wanted to send that off to the hydrologist so they could look at those numbers and reevaluate all the numbers that they used during their study in computer modeling to have an idea how all that interplays, but I don't have an answer for you.
Right, well, again, it's just, it's ideas on the table. So the idea would be like yet another 2 cisterns, getting a couple 100,000 more gallons?
Yeah, so ultimately, even the federal government probably has a budget. And this is something that we're gonna have to go back to the members and discuss a project like this, but I think, we're trying to hone in on solutions that will enable us all to be happy at the end of the day.
Well, I'm looking for where, you're just brainstorming, getting out, where are the win-win solutions? So let me ask another question. Can you reuse all your water from the club?
Yeah, no, we would do that. Yeah, we don't have a problem with that.
So now
So
here,
that ties in with the cistern. It's a problem trying to get it all the way back to the pond.
all right, I granted that, feasibility of various solutions, things may happen in different phases. I think that the science of the pond has some interest, but down the line, just in terms of, I think there's some hydrodynamics that might actually be very beneficial here, but I think that there's more immediate things to be looking at in terms of anything that you guys are trying to achieve. And from my point of view, if you can take all of the water, wastewater from Gardner's Bay Country Club, take it out of being dumped into the aquifer and then sent down to the drinking wells downstream from there, treat it and reuse it, that would be 100% gain for everybody's point of view, both the reduction in contamination and increase in water availability.
Are you suggesting a small wastewater treatment center?
Yes, Lisa, that's what this is.
So it's reuse of the septic water, on property.
Yeah, we're talking about, taking water to, what could, we can't do it on a municipal level at this time. And certainly there are concerns about moving any wastewater anywhere else we can see within the community. But the wastewater that's right now being pumped into the ground, right there, being reclaimed, reused, having nitrogen and having everything, having an additional chance for root systems to pull it out, taking, decontaminating to the point and learning, getting through this learning curve of how do we do wastewater reclamation, which ultimately is going to have to come if we're going to solve problems, whether it has to happen in place or whatever. Here's an in-place situation.
So is
Go
it
ahead, Lisa.
similar to the proposal that the Heights had to take the wastewater treatment center, wastewater from the treatment center and shunt it up to Goat Hill and
Right.
use that to irrigate the, the teas and the greens?
Known as fertigation, right?
Yeah.
Scope?
Did you guys discuss that on your walk?
We didn't discuss it on our walk. We discussed it on the phone.
I see.
In the follow-up to the walk.
I see.
So now, so yeah, except Lisa, the one thing I would just say is, but much more plausible, much more feasible. We're not now talking about pumping everything up to Goat Hill, and we're also not talking about an area that is recharged for West Next wells.
Is there enough volume for that
Yeah, you want volumes.
with your clubhouse?
What are you talking?
It's not gonna be huge.
What's the percentage of that would come out the pipe if you have 600,000?
Going in.
You know what I'm saying? If we're.
Most of them, 98% of it,
98%, 95%,
500,000 gallons.
something like that. So you
That's how much
can-
your clubhouse uses now, half a million gallons.
Well, we're 500,000 right now. So.
I mean, that could be a very sophisticated suggestion.
Wait. I thought I heard Jay say that the usage by the clubhouse was 100,000 gallons a year.
Additional to the 500,000 we already pump.
Going from 500,000 to 600,000.
But the septic, the septic coming out of the clubhouse is 100,000 gallons a year?
Well, it should be everything that goes in is probably coming
Okay.
back out.
All right.
Yeah, you have 500,000 gallons there, Andrew.
A lot of gray water.
No, the gray water.
Yeah, 500,000 gallons of gray water that right now people are drinking rather than we're reclaiming and reusing. Same people who would be.
Gray and black water.
So I think, what we're looking for is that the way in which Gardner's Bay and Country Club is looking to us to say, we kind of want to work with you to make this all work out.
Win-win.
Right, and here we have something that I don't know, does anybody have how this isn't a win-win?
There's money involved.
Except that it's gonna cost something to do it. So,
What I got out of our visit
yeah, go ahead.
what was basically, it was a brainstorming session. First of all, it was a tour, so we understood the topography and generally the water use. And then it was a brainstorming session where the club was trying to tease out our receptiveness to different ideas. Because the club needed to formulate some of those ideas, but to do that, it had to spend professional dollars with its own hydrologists and so forth. And before it sent them on a number of different errands, it wanted to kind of know where we were and what we were open to. And what I got out of that was that our group, at least, was open to various ways to retain water on site, which was some berming, also in particular areas, open to underground, essentially what I would call a day tank, so that some of that water could be stored and subsequently used without drawing on as much on well water. But what was needed was a strategy which had two elements to it. One, kind of pumping and operating protocols, and then also what are the facility needs, so that those ideas could be developed in concept with the club's professionals. So I think at this point, the ball's in the club's court to take the feedback that they have received from the two visits to come up with that strategy of water retention, well pumping, irrigation protocols, and the facilities that are necessary to make that happen. I think that's where we are. Jay, am I, is that fair?
Yeah, I think you're right on. You know, now we need to go back and do some work based on our discussions. I think, you know, if we're going down this road, you know, I think we're looking for a rewrite of the code to make this feasible for us, to make it work. And then we're gonna have to, you know, make a presentation to the membership on the fact that we can provide a successful project. And then we need to reevaluate our budgets. The irrigation system that we promised we would install is installed. And we have not yet begun on the cistern work because we just don't know how all of this comes together yet. So now we really need to go back and do some more homework and try to pull the whole package together. And it may be in a series of phases. It may be a series of first cistern phase, second cistern phase, pond third, how all of this program pulls together.
Rainwater reuse.
Rainwater, that's right. So, you know, there is a lot of work that has to be done on our side to be able to pull this together, but I still remain optimistic that there's a lot of good ideas in the room and that we can make this a feasible, workable, and pilot project.
All right, Ken's definitely wanting.
Yeah, just a question regarding increase in membership, whether this is part of the objective at all. I heard it was like limited at one time to 300. Is that still?
350.
Is it 350 now? Okay.
But
there's no plan for these two things to tie together relative to increasing membership?
Personally, I would like to have more island involvement.
Yeah.
As a local island guy working here in the club.
I just wonder if there's any strategies that we could do win-win situation of increasing local talent.
Yeah, that's what Jay is saying, and I think we should be thinking about it because it speaks to island control over water resources.
Right. And
Gardner's Bay has been very friendly to the junior program, right? Shelter Island High School, they practice and are welcome to come play at our place.
Right.
We have a very strong junior program. We have 100 juniors right now, basically on a wait list or member. So we're very strong that way.
100, about you said?
Yeah, 100 juniors. So we probably could do a better job, in my personal opinion, of probably trying to be more inclusive.
any kind of deal for residents, old or whatever, stuff like that, or
Excuse me?
for older residents besides, you have one now
We're
where you,
going to present some ideas to the board coming up here, probably most likely in this next meeting, next week, after the 2 weekends. And we'll see how well it's received.
some of the criticism comes down to it's listed on off islanders now.
All right, we have a percentage. I mean, the Off Island group came to us in the 2008 collapse. That's how we ended up having we have the.
Have the number you have.
And then people talk and they say it's a wonderful place to join, and that's how that happens.
One thing we discussed was the concept of rainwater capture as a way to help close that gap of what's allowed now versus what's being asked. And that's something that would put back on the club to revisit professionally if that kind of a code adjustment, because right now rainwater capture is not permitted. So
Canals running through and going and dumping.
We have the parking lot, we have the roof, we have probably almost 2 acres of solid surface up there that we could
generally, we've taken this approach, not just with this application, but the town, more broadly looks at, recharging as a way to get more water in the ground as beneficial. But I think you're looking at something of this scale and looking to avoid or eliminate extra pumping, or any pumping for that matter. The idea that we could maybe more closely link the rainwater to the use. So instead of capturing rainwater, putting it in the ground and letting it sort of join back into the aquifer in the area, we'd be capturing rainwater and then reusing that for irrigation. So we would be bypassing that recharge phase, which the club has already pitched. Oh, we're going to increase our capture and recharge on this, sizable scale, but we're saying, all right, well, perhaps that's not a direct enough link. Maybe this sort of vague recharge goal is happening in times of the year when it's not necessarily conducive. Yes, it's a benefit because we're eliminating runoff, but that seems like an approach that's worth exploring. Is it feasible to capture rainwater strategically throughout the summer that would otherwise be rolling off the golf course?
The winter as well.
Or throughout the winter, would it be feasible to capture rainwater and directly use it for the irrigation needs?
Nooks and crannies in that place.
There are, yeah.
And calculate the amount of storage necessary for that activity.
Yeah, so I mean, just, back of the napkin, there's plenty of space here. You get plenty of rain falls on the property to meet that need, but whether you can do that in the context of the way it's laid out and the new operational plan, I don't know, that's something for the club to look at and say whether they can do. But certainly, I think that's a reasonable pursuit here. If the golf course can capture water, 6 million gallons of water extra, then we've, eliminated the need for extra pumping. And there's a lot of details to be worked out and something like that, but in concept.
Can I ask a question on here, Joe?
Yeah.
So did you talk about where the water capture would be, this large water capture amount, and how close it is, or how it's adjacent to the wells in Hay Beach and people's personal wells? Because in my head, I'm thinking if you have a large basin that's capturing water adjacent to people's well water, that's going to impact what they're going to be able to draw from. So I don't know.
Certainly. No, you're right, Lisa. And by no means is what I'm suggesting, there's no blessing over this. It's just simply in concept saying, if you're in need of water and we don't prefer you take it out of the ground, here's something we haven't explored, is capturing the rainwater and using this. And when we just look at the total numbers, millions, hundreds of millions of gallons fall on the golf course each year. And we're talking about, a very, very small fraction of that would potentially be captured. And that's, the burden of demonstrating that to us as a safe and prudent plan is for the hydrologist and the club. Not, I'm not suggesting that I did that already, but I am suggesting that that's something that we should look at as an alternative approach here.
Yeah, and I would suggest that, you look at where the placement of these captured air basins will be. And I know Jay spoke about the 3 wells and the zone of effect and how small it's going to be on wells to neighbors, but I think that this is also something that needs to be taken into consideration is how this zone of capture will impact wells. That's just my 2 cents.
I think you
My
have to be
question
very,
for Jay is whether Jay has enough feedback from us to be able to formulate a strategy and including the facilities component of that with your own experts at the club, so that you can come back to us, with a more developed strategy. Do you have enough feedback from us, or do you need more
I
feedback?
think so. I think we're talking about, so the use that would come out of recapture would be used right away. So during the early parts of the year, in recapture, whatever we could get would be used and then supplemented through the rest of the year from below the ground.
Okay.
so this,
So
the whole,
the next step here is for the club to come back to the committee with a more developed strategy. The facilities that are necessary as a component of that strategy, how those facilities would be used, whether there needs to be, whether there are proposed amendments to the town code as a result of that strategy. In other words, the whole thing just more fleshed out. That's the next step.
That's correct.
Okay, fine.
and I'll come back to the whole winter, summer extraction, the pumpage.
Yeah, so let me talk to some professionals. I know we don't have anybody on our side that can really talk to that, so let me ask them what how that all plays in. They may run computer models or something to evaluate that, so I just don't.
And
you're
potential impacts on water intrusion, even at our perimeter.
You're outside, look, we acknowledge that we're outside of a year travel in most areas here to the shore. So there is a question of if you capture in the winter, are you and don't pump in the summer, are you improving things at all? And you raise a legitimate question about that.
Yeah.
But there's a science to this, and there's an argument in both directions. So let's leave it.
Yeah, let's let them.
I'm just putting it on the table.
Jay is saying he wants to have hydrological analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, one last thing.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna turn into a pumpkin in 2 seconds.
You did say something about having measurements that you have taken over the years relative to your well. Did we ever get that data?
I think so. I think Chris sent it that next time.
What was that?
The measurements. I know we sent it.
The well measurements.
Well measurements
from
Gardner's Bay Country.
Yep. I saw them.
Historic measurements.
Yeah.
But
Let me take a look.
I just wondered.
and
I'll make sure you get them today.
ongoing measuring technologies in this process as part of that planning is clearly
Real-time monitoring, whatever you guys recommend ultimately for real-time monitoring of the wells.
kind of need to know, what's right.
We may look for your recommendation on what we should do there.
Okay,
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you for your time.
thank you, Jay.
See you guys.
So, yeah, and I mean, I'm glad that Jay said he had to turn into a pumpkin, because we too have to turn into a pumpkin. And we have at least the center triangle water results really need to be reviewed. So, I know Joe has done some work on this. We have our data back from the high nitrogen triangle.
We have most of the data back. I'll start with that. So this is just supposed to be a preliminary discussion. We have a few other tests that we're still waiting on. They shouldn't materially change the data set here, but what you have is just a very high-level summary broken down by section, which corresponds with this color-coded map. The numbers on there represent the section number that's on the first column of the table. And
Excuse me, Joe, is
Yeah.
there any way to share that on the screen for the people who are participating by Zoom, like Lisa?
It
and
looks
me?
like it's happening as we speak.
Thank you.
so, I think it's a little too early to draw definitive conclusions. So my intention today was to just share some basic data and start the conversations, but it should be we should plan for a more robust conversation and presentation of the data in the coming months, maybe early next year or something like that. Because it seems like this is a process we're going to repeat now for other communities by a slightly different mechanism. So the first few things that I think are worth discussing is that the sections are different from each other, as we may have expected. Meg did a nice job of laying out this map so that the testing sections closely correspond with different watersheds. So for the most part, people in your section are in the same sub-ground watershed, meaning the water in the ground is moving more or less in the same direction. You may be upstream or downstream, depending on where you are in the section, but you're in like a groundwater community, so to speak. And we broke the averages and the readings up accordingly by section, at least preliminarily, to help you understand how your neighborhood fares against the others. We've talked many times about how the center triangle is unique in that the water, groundwater is moving. We're at the top of the mountain, the groundwater is moving in every which direction away from the center. And that's part of the purpose of breaking up into these sections. So for instance, the groundwater from section 4 to section 6 are going in opposite directions because we're at the top of the watershed. So looking down the list, you can see our highs and lows in respective neighborhoods. We had approximately, let's see, in some sections, the percent failures were as high as 33%.
What does that mean, percent failure?
Failure above the potability limits.
Okay.
Yep. So that,
Why is the third column says failures and nitrogen as well?
those,
And could
okay,
you-
so.
Could you change the screen so we could look at those numbers?
Sure. So the tests that were offered included nitrogen in the form of nitrate, nitrite, ammonia, and bacteria. And so the failure represents the count in any of those categories. So if you failed for bacteria or you were over the nitrogen limit, that counts as a failure. If you failed in any category, that's considered non-potable, so that's a failure. But then there's a separate breakouts here if you failed for nitrogen, if you failed for bacteria. So you can see where those failures fell into place. The total percent failure overall is about 10%. And I'm not sure if that number is higher or lower than people had in their mind. But the number that I think is most important here, this is the takeaway for me as I've looked at these, is that when we looked at the percent failure, but we extended that to the action threshold. So action is 50% of the failure level. So if nitrate potability limits are 10, the action level is considered 5.
5 to 10.
5 to 10, right, over 5. So when I extended that query to include everybody that was over 5, who's in the action level, the number jumps up to over 50%, the majority. So my takeaway here, at least initially, is that we have a number of tests that exceeded the potability limit, 10% for one reason or the other. And that's not something not to sneeze at, I guess the phrase goes. That is substantial. But the number that screams at me is the 50% when we look at the action threshold. That's indicative of a problem that is widespread and telling us that a lot of folks, this should be on their radar. When I look at that number and I reflect on John Cronin's nitrogen modeling for the center, about 5 years ago, John looked at regionally, how much nitrogen does the aquifer parse out naturally versus how much are we adding each year, a mass balance. We knew very clearly that we're adding more than can be taken out on a given year.
Right.
So we know that the cumulative level of nitrogen year on year is increasing. And when we look at data like this that says half of the tests here are in that action limit or have already failed, and we combine that with the idea that we are adding more nitrogen each year, then we find ourselves in a situation where we can expect or know that nitrogen levels will continue to increase.
We're not on a good trend.
We're not on a good trend, and the majority of people are in the category of take action. So if we were to time our response, the time is now. We know that folks are in that limit where they need to do something about this. And I think really this tells us what we kind of suspected, that we have a growing nitrogen problem, that it's perhaps not catastrophic. For some people here, they need to do something about this right away. They've been notified that they failed their test for one reason or the other. But that we have an opportunity to course correct before that 51% moves over to the failed column and we start seeing more and more potability drop off.
A question, I mean, do we know enough now to be able to measure impact of IA systems? In other words, if you
Yes.
started IA systems on all of these sites tomorrow, how quickly could you measure the impact that that would have?
How quickly we can measure the impact is difficult, but when we use that in our mass balance model, we can tell how many IA systems we need to, bend the curve, so to speak, on that nitrogen, baseline nitrogen level. And we've modeled that before.
Okay.
When we were talking about the center wastewater system,
Right.
we used that model.
Right.
It's really about pounds of nitrogen that
It's
you're
a mass
taking out of the
balance
system.
equation.
Totally. So, we have a pretty good idea on how many IA systems it will take to hit equilibrium. It's an achievable number. We know it's not impossible. That's part of the conversation here is how do we move from, this data to developing or pushing policy? And I'm not sure that's a conversation we have here today because there's still more to be done on the data perspective. But I think the good and the bad news. The good news is that I think there aren't really a lot of surprises here. This is what has been spoken about, from local experience and suspicion, anecdotally. This is more or less what the conversation has been in the community probably for decades. And this, arguably isn't conclusive. There are lots and lots of variables in this. The sample size is pretty significant. The scattering is pretty good from section to section, but obviously there's all sorts of blind spots that we don't know about. There are people who didn't participate. There are people who perhaps know they have a problem and chose not to participate.
We don't know what we don't know.
There's all sorts of blind spots here, but just taking this at face value, this is pretty good. This is pretty good data.
Yeah.
This is great.
We're able to now say half of our high nitrogen triangle is in that 5 to 10 milligram range with nitrogen, which means that there have been documentable health impacts.
Yeah, and also very important, Peter, I forgot to mention this. If you look down the percent failure category, there's a lot of zeros. Mm-hmm. So we know section to section, there's a pretty good variation in what the issues are. Some are quite high, but there are a lot with zero failures, which is, I think, telling us that, groundwater there is not so much of an issue as perhaps that group has been looped in, whereas other areas, are very much the focal point of.
And that
So,
we've seen,
Joe?
sorry, Andrew, let me just finish the one thought and then I'll let you write in. That tells us that the flow modeling that we started to do with the center system is a very important tool for saying where are impacts occurring and where can we expect. And this is confirming what we're seeing with that, so.
Yeah, absolutely, especially if we want to take the next step in more detailed and specific policy. We have now funding for IA systems. That's across the board. We have an effort for commercial IA systems here in the center of town. We talked about the centralized system. That's sort of a separate discussion. But now we have, I think, more detailed vision as to what neighborhoods perhaps should be extra
Higher
priority.
priority for the WQI to be
Right.
putting on their scale. Right. Okay. Andrew.
Yeah, I can't tell because I don't have the map and the data in front of me at the same time. Is when you look at the failure rates and where the zeros are in some of the districts, does that tell you anything about where this is probably coming from? Or does it indicate that it's actually fairly diffuse?
We see generally the concentration is between the school and Manatee Creek, so that side of the center.
9, 10, 11 sections of the map, if you take a look at that.
Yeah, so, but there are plenty that popped in other areas.
Other areas that are getting it too.
Yeah, but, I would say,
Like 3 and 5 and are.
generally speaking, they correspond with the higher density neighborhoods, and that's, relatively speaking, higher density for Shelter Island, that is. And they correspond with areas immediately downstream of the center. Yeah, and, when we look at the test from town buildings, which we often describe as being, right at the top of the mountain, that is exactly what we see as well, that the town buildings don't have very, very bad levels in terms of nitrogen, but 1 or 2 properties over, they do. And that's kind of reflected here as well. It's not the actual bullseye, but perhaps the first ring around the bullseye.
So the municipal wells are in this data?
The municipal, no, actually not in here, but they will be included in the
They
final.
will be
ones.
included,
Yep.
okay.
This
Yep.
is just the
This is
water
just-
testing Goldman did.
Exactly.
And then we'll take the other data we have and we'll add it in and we'll have a more complete data set.
Yep.
And the,
I do think it's interesting to note that Area 13, the one down here, is actually a different watershed. It's not part of this central.
The other side of
Let's
Manatee
go to the
Creek.
other
It's the
side of the
opposite
island.
side of Manatee Creek.
Yeah.
So you can notice that the numbers drop off significantly in Area 13 because it's not being fed by the center population.
Isolated by Manatee.
This side of Manatee
it's the
Creek.
aliens too,
Yeah,
the aliens from.
Your
from-
flow mapping is to this side of Manatee Creek.
correct.
How-
And that gets caught because in the triangle, when we do the assessor's data pull for that area, it pulls that side of the peninsula that comes into the creek. So that's why that area got pulled in, but it really isn't kind of part of this central.
This is either Meg or you,
But
Joe.
it's good control in a way.
Have we made any progress in recording our AI installations on our GIS system in a way that we can begin to track this better relative to breaking the back
Track it in the sense of,
of location? In other words, basically saying installation.
right.
This is what Joe is kind of getting at.
Yeah, so the mass balance model that we've been working with looks at the entire center triangle. It's never been broken up into section. If these are sections that we want to more, make a better commitment, more of a commitment to defining,
Right.
we can start breaking those down into piece by piece. But taking into consideration here, which I think is important, the downstream effect is very relevant. So, mapping the number of IA systems that go into 11 may not be as.
As relevant
Yeah, exactly.
as mapping them on 11 and 10, or something like that, right? I'm just saying it'd be nice to have that information
Speaking-
recorded properly.
Yeah, to your point, no, we haven't been updating the GIS,
Right.
but I am putting together a list of every property that's installed in IA system. I got the report from Mary Ellen.
Oh, wow.
So that I can give that list to our GIS people and they can map it for us. Because some of the properties that are currently mapped on our GIS just had the intention of doing it, but never actually followed through and installed. Because the way our septic registry was originally designed, you filled it out when you had an intention of putting a system in, but not when you had actually completed it. So now our septic registry is required when you complete your system, so we know it's in the ground.
It was really hard to determine that by looking at the map, basically.
Yeah, so I'm working on updating all that
Yeah,
information.
that would be great, because before, they took these work orders, basically, when they were done,
Yep.
they just put them in a folder and dropped them in the filing cabinet, basically. So there was no process
Yeah.
I knew of that would really help us.
The good news is we have the data. It just has to be updated on the map.
Right.
And we use that data to inform the model,
So I'm
just
working
not the
on-
map.
I
Yeah,
had the same thought you did. After I got this data, I was like, now I want to see how this marries up with IA system installations and see if,
It shows penetration of the.
yeah.
Can I just confirm on the action level is, that's 50% of the nitrogen, nitrates. It has nothing to do with the bacteria.
bacteria is pass fail. So you either failed or you either have it or you don't.
They're combined in the.
So actual level is 50% of the two non-potable nitrogen.
Nitrogen, yeah. And there's 50% of the, there could be action level for, nitrate or ammonia, but none of them were triggered. So
Right.
it's not relevant.
But
Okay,
yeah, but
Joe,
and we also
so-
haven't, yeah, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead, Andrew.
Joe, what do you recommend in terms of a process to evaluate the alternatives to address this potable water issue? So we obviously know one alternative is public water. And I'm curious whether there are point of use alternatives that are worth considering. So that we can, okay, now we've got an issue. It's a potable water issue. And so the question is, what do we do about it?
Well, we don't really do anything about it, I guess, as the Water Advisory Committee, except talk about it in the context of, what can you do as a citizen in the community? But I'll just back up for a second. If I had, if these tests came back and it was 75% over the potability limit today, then we've got like a public health crisis, that there are way too many failing wells here for us to, as a government, as a community, to sleep well at night. That's not the case that we're in crisis mode, but we do have an abundance of nitrogen. That's a problem. So I think really all of the solutions are on the table. It's really a matter of what the community wants to do. Public water is a great option if there's the demand and the support for it. On the flip side, that's not the only way to skin this cat. Point of use systems do work for this level of contamination. Point of use systems have their own challenges, but they're cost effective. They're effective.
Quick.
They can be installed tomorrow. They concentrate the contaminants, as we talked about before, and put them back in. So whole house filtration systems are not, recommended, but we're not talking generally about water quality that requires whole house filtration. We're talking about point of use, cooking, and
Doesn't bend the curve.
it doesn't bend the curve, right? So I think that's the broader role that the town and the committee should be talking about. That's, I think, our role here is what are we going to do about the longer term problem that we are putting too much nitrogen in. That's the sustainability issue. The solutions from a drinking water perspective, that's, I think, demand based. But for our committee, that should be our focus, I believe, is we've identified a sustainability issue that will get worse if we don't bring this back into balance. If we continue to put more nitrogen in, then not only will the drinking water quality worsen here where we've tested, but it's going to have collateral impacts to the downstream well users, and it's going to continue to have negative impacts on our estuary groups, the Menantic Creek Keepers and the other estuary fresh pond committee folks who are coming in. These are all integrated, and it all stems from an overabundance of nitrogen in the source water, be it from the ground for drinking water or from it permeating into these estuaries. So when I look at this problem more broadly, that's where I'm hoping we can have some impact, is what are we going to do about too much nitrogen going in the ground?
And
Can I ask a
What, should we let Lisa in? And then Greg?
Oh, I just was gonna say, Meg, have the people that you notified, have you received any response or feedback from them or any questions?
We didn't
about-
notify that. So if they got a failing test, all of that information went directly to the homeowner. So we,
Oh, no, okay.
yeah, so the tests were all done anonymously to the town. So the collector went to the house, took the sample. The specific test results were sent directly to the homeowner, and we just got the reading number. So we don't know what address.
Section.
Right, and
I
it went
see.
in by
But I
section.
can tell you that Goldman
nothing-
informed the
nothing-
homeowners and also advised the homeowners.
Yeah, so for instance, there were a number of people who had bacteria issues. The protocol with the health department is to retest those, and there's a follow-up procedure. That was all done individually and privately. So the town had no involvement.
Through Goldman. So
Through
the town
Goldman, yeah.
Oh, the town did pay for the follow-up tests. So there were secondary tests done on those homes that had failed, those failures, and then they received advice from Goldman about what you might do, or if they came and asked me or Meg.
One of the topics that, in terms of users of this report, when it's clearer, I think, would be for the WQI. One of the reasons that we said, okay, we gave you the money to do this study because we want to have that information to go to the public and say, okay, here's what happened in this region. And we don't know whether or not, you didn't or didn't take part in the study, but you should know that, 71% of the people in your zone, they had a problem or will have a problem because they're at the high end of the approval of the good water curve. And we're here ready to help, and we're ready to help you put in an IA system. So once this cleans up, once this gets cleaned up and clear, then I think that the WQI can start. And some conversation has already been about, okay, how do we publicize the situation here? So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say that it seems that we have a responsibility to notify the public about this information. So for example, if somebody decided to opt out of testing, they may be more compelled to get their water tested. I'm just thinking that, are we going to release this information? Are we going to make it accessible to the public?
Absolutely. Yeah, Lisa, actually, I think you're totally right. And one important deliverable for however we close this out is, I think, to produce a map that's not alarming, but conclusive in the sense, if I looked at this and I didn't participate in the test, but I could see that my neighborhood didn't do so well, I want to be able to clearly convey that information to help notify people of what's going on in their little water community.
This is like a Julie Lane article type thing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know, basically, how.
I think it would be, I think that the user, the WQI, you guys can't support people and say, here.
Right, no, you're one of the users,
help.
one of the important constituents. Consumers of this data.
Once this gets.
Andrew is trying to get a word in edgewise, so
When this map gets published, the first thing people are going to do is they're going to find out where they are on the map.
Right.
And whether they've had their water tested or not, they're going to find out where they are on the map. And they're going to say, what percentage in this particular area has got a problem? And if they're so minded, and many of them will be, they're going to want to know what we think they ought to do about it. In other words, what are their options? Is one of their options could be a point of use filtration and what that costs and what's involved with that. And another option could be potable water for either their area or as part of a larger project. And I think it's incumbent on us as the Water Advisory Committee to release this map and indicate what the options are. Because now we've found all this high quality data. And so the next thing is, well, now what? And we need to answer that question with a set of recommendations either to individual homeowners or to the community at large. I think that's the next thing we have to do.
Andrew, I would say my initial reaction to that is a bit cautious. I don't know that it's appropriate for us as a committee or even the town now to step in and advise folks what is best for them. I'm not sure that's a role that we're intended to play. And to your point earlier about, we were talking about the saltwater discussion, understanding the problem was important. And I'm not sure that just a nitrogen test really gives us the full scope of what our drinking water policy should be. You know, we're just testing for nitrogen. It's really not by any means a comprehensive way to say all your water in this neighborhood is good or all your water in this neighborhood is bad. And it becomes very complicated to make a formal suggestion on an individual basis about what's best for them. I do think it's important for us to have some response ready about who they could talk to privately about what they want to do or what some common next steps are. But I would really caution against, taking these tests and having them be what defines our long-term drinking water policy, because it's just a little light in terms of looking at the full spectrum of water quality issues.
Don't have that mandate.
No, and the thing about nitrogen too is, it's indicative of where the wastewater is going, but there's many other things. Somebody could have had a fine test, but they've got some other unrelated water quality problem. They may have PFAS in their water or something that we don't know about. So we have to be very cautious in how we present the data. One, to not be alarmist. We don't want to say that everybody in section 9 or 11 has a serious water problem, when in fact it may have been 6 people, that are having an issue very isolated to where their neighbor's septic system. And on the flip side, I don't think we want to bear the burden of saying section 3 is great. No, but not a single failed test, because we only looked at a handful of wastewater related issues.
I also am cautious about, so point of use systems, they certainly can take the nitrogen out of your water. But to Joe's point that nitrogen, and to earlier on, John Cronin's point that nitrogen never travels alone, you can be masking a problem by just removing all the nitrogen from your, so point of view systems, I think, deserve analysis by us. They deserve really close looking at them. We deserve some thought about what they do and what they do not do, so that we are providing people with clear information. But as a recommendation, it's
only
more information.
I think only if we had a strong feeling as to what to do, could we say something? And we don't. The reality is just what you.
Well, look, we've had we've touched on the public water discussion on the Silver Beach issue. Public water doesn't have to be associated with a particular, problem. It could be for other reasons, like in Silver Beach, resiliency or the risk of losing potability. You have potability now, but in a hurricane situation, you lose potability. So public water is a solution, but it doesn't have to be the only solution. It certainly can't be the solution if the community doesn't support it. If the community doesn't want it, then, it's really case closed on that. We can't force people to do this.
Or can't afford it.
There are a lot of complications with that, but generally speaking, that has been the approach for the rest of our broader area.
This is for our information.
It's for our
basically.
As we discuss it with the community, it builds community support for building the appropriate infrastructure for addressing that mass balance problem.
Hopefully get a plan.
Joe, what would the next step be then? And what time frame are we talking?
I think the next step is to develop a presentation with this data. I guess it's to the town board. Present the new town board. So perhaps we can circulate and, I'll put something together. We can circulate it internally and see what we think is best in terms of the optics and the messaging. And then we would deliver the results to the town board.
Probably February.
The island-wide solution to nitrates, again, and the things that travel with it, we can't, the island-wide resolution is IA systems and reduce the nitrate that we're pumping back into the ground with our waste. And we can't do that. We don't have the mechanism to do that for PFAs or PFOs, and we don't have it for heart medicines and things like that. But, okay, fine, those are separate items and they are emerging. Nitrates, that's the elephant in the room right now. We're not looking at.
Absolutely.
It's coming from human activity. The nitrates are coming from human activity.
All this stuff.
Activity, good word. Okay.
All that is coming from, right.
Drinking water.
Yeah.
Living?
I tried
I
to
think,
tell my
you know-
kids, okay, let's have your activity now, and they said, no, I'm just doing my pants.
From a policy perspective, I think you can, the decision about IA systems is influenced by two major things. The impact of the estuary, we have a responsibility to stop our nitrogen outflow there. But if our concern here is what else is coming into the groundwater, what travels with the wastewater, IA systems are going to they're going to come up short. It's a big investment to change over all of the infrastructure here, the septic infrastructure, to address nitrates, and then we'll be left with the same problem, just with a new name
30 years down the road.
for the next thing. If that is the approach, if that is the concern, which may not be, you know, there's no indication that PFAS will get to a level, for instance, that makes the drinking water unsafe. But if that is the approach, that you think nitrates are just today's chapter and there'll be something else later, then really some sort of drinking water infrastructure is needed, because that's the only way you can at scale deliver.
Look, and we're not going to solve these problems. We're just going to mitigate them to a degree. So, you know, the IA systems are a happening thing. We clearly need them.
And the mechanisms for those are already in place.
And we've got it going. We've got it out, and we just need to.
Got approved systems.
Scale up.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about the possibility of having one not experimental, but privately constructed fertigation or, you know, wastewater reuse program. Perhaps if there's an IA system for all of the municipal buildings, perhaps we can take what's done with the IA system with the school. We'll have a pool of water in the center that we could do water reclamation rather than and learn what's in our water and what it would take to take that out. But all of those things will be various drops in buckets. And we got to do all of it. And we have to, and, you know, and it's going to be a balancing thing, and there won't be money for every single thing. But we clearly need to extend infrastructure in a lot of different directions.
There's a high probability in my mind that identifying sources of water on the island for the potentiality of a future public system.
Very important.
Is a very, very high priority. I mean, you just said, that, you know, we don't know what the future is going to be, but we do know probably somewhere down the line, we're going to have to get off these wells and septics. So for the long run, for this little island community that we have.
Speaking of that, there was some investigation going on in Sachem's.
Yeah, nothing's happened yet, but Suffolk Water has agreed to test the area for potability and functionality. We haven't authorized that yet, but it's something we should do.
Up near the bean fields would be.
And they're in 5, right? Or is that 5?
The school is in, Sachem's is in 5.
Yeah, 5, which is a 3.68, so below the action limit.
Yeah.
All right, so, you know, again, news you can use. All right.
Yeah.
Well done.
All right, so look, we have a bunch of other items that we're not going to get to. It's almost 4 o'clock. Lisa, I apologize because I think that the fertilizer subcommittee is doing really important work. I attended the last meeting. Is it okay that we defer till the next meeting, kind of reviewing where we're at with that? Or would you want to comment on it a little bit right now?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm just asking, you were on number 8 and we're up to number 7.
I can give you a very quick summary of the meeting. We had a very healthy showing of people, and different people have decided to sit on different groups. 2 of them are working on a brochure to put out because it was widely understood that education, homeowner education, is the principal component to moving people away from fertilizer use. But also what I did is I looked through the Shelter Island Code. There is no dedicated spot in the code that deals with fertilizer. And we looked at different legislation from other towns and around, and how that it's very specific. You can go to the code, punch in fertilizer, and you come to one space. So we decided that there definitely needs to be some codifying language and recommendations, so that if somebody's looking to see what the town's legislation is they can go to one spot and find that. So that was pretty much the summary. A lot of good suggestions, a lot of, very good professionals sitting and discussing this whole thing.
Good.
So our next meeting is November 27th, which is, I think,
That's
next
the
week.
part.
And
Is it
we're
at
going to
town
make
hall?
recommendations to the town to put something in the code.
November 27th, did you say?
Yes.
Is that in Thanksgiving? After Monday, after Thanksgiving?
The week after.
After Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. And is that at town hall?
yeah, we go there. We're usually here at 5 o'clock at night. So I would think if you could put us at the top of the agenda for
Yes, we can.
January,
Yes,
that would be helpful.
absolutely. Yep, for
We should have
December.
something- Right now, it's formative, but we should have something substantial to report then.
You'd rather January than December?
What do you mean?
You're saying
No,
at top of the
December. I meant
agenda for our next meeting or the one after?
No, for December.
The next
For
one.
December. Okay.
Yeah. December 27th is our meeting.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so December, that's the subcommittee meeting. So for January, WAC meeting,
I see. So the January. Got it.
because I don't think that, I don't know, I'm all screwed up here. Wait a minute. We're meeting we're meeting November 27th.
11/27.
So the December 18th meeting, you'd like to be at the top of the agenda. Right. Okay.
Somewhere at a reportable point.
Fair.
Okay, good.
All right.
All right. So again, I think that we do need to adjourn for now. So motion.
Second.
Okay.
So moved. You and I had a long conversation prior to come here.